sure you guys are familiar with comic book villains such as Crazy Quilt, Eraserhead, Polka Dot Man, Mime, Tarantula, King Tut, Orca, Killer Moth, March Harriet, Zodiac Master, Gentleman Ghost, Clock King, Calendar Man, Catman, Zebra Man, am I missing anything else? Kite Man, and of course the Condiment King. But are you guys familiar with the Phantasm?
By the way, yes, I took that villains list from the Lego Batman movie. Before the days of Legos and all those direct-to-video films, there was a moment when Batman had an animated feature. Fresh from the acclaimed animated series, this movie brought Batman back to his roots to being a detective, where he has to figure out why these murders are happening that are caused by a figure that is known as the Phantasm. Yeah, sure, he's a superhero first, but that D in DC is there for a reason. But the movie is not just made to solve a mystery. It also offers its own interpretation of Batman's origins. So you don't just get a bunch of awesome action scenes, but you also get to see a lot of the Bruce Wayne side of him and how he became the Caped Crusader. In fact, one of the best things about the movie is how it delivers such rich and developed characters given to the hands of amazing voice actors, on top of the beloved stylized animation from the series. And of course, you can't have a great Batman film around without the Joker causing mayhem.
Makes you want to laugh, doesn't it, Arthur?
Now, this might sound crazy, but there are fans out there that would actually claim that this is one of the best films of the franchise. And I don't mean just animated films, I mean legitimately one of the best Batman films. Like legit up there with The Dark Knight and the 1989 movie. So with that said, how is it that a movie that is considered to be ranked up like way up there isn't really getting that much recognition? Well, you see, the idea of putting this on the big screen was a little bit of a last-minute decision.
Originally, Warner Brothers just wanted to have this be a direct-to-video film. However, the company quickly decided that it seemed good enough for theaters, which gave the crew an insane production time of around 8 months! It's not just barely enough time to make an entire movie, but also not enough to give it some proper marketing. As a result, the movie came out mostly unnoticed, and since then, because it's more associated to the series, including its animation quality, it's mostly been treated as just that, an expansion to the series. Because it's an animated Batman film, it's not being taken as seriously as its live-action counterparts, and it would often get overlooked from the Dark Knight's list of features.
I've seen you go through similar phases in 2016 and 2012 and 2008 and 2005 and 1997 and 1995 and 1992 and 1989 and that weird one in 1966.
Come on, Lego Batman, you can't even show your animated brethren some love? I mean, if you are willing to mention the Joel Schumacher films and Dawn of Justice, then where the fridge is 1993?
Probably worth the Google.
Whenever there are people around making discussions about who is the best Batman or what is his best film, sometimes it's great to know that it's actually a cartoon that would get the last laugh.
There's a special kind of magic that comes with underrated films. It's like you're about to discover some secret magic that is so amazing, yet not many people know about it. At that point, you'll know exactly how Mrs. Brisby felt.
Yes, Don Bluth is back on the list, and not only are we looking into his first animated film, but also what many people regard to be his best. Fresh out of Disney, Don and his crew took everything they've learned from the old studio and apply it all onto this film in order to recapture that old spirit from the movies that Walt produced. The result is a well-crafted world where science and magic believably live around us, with a story filled with intensity and a lot of heart, with a cast of complex and memorable characters that have their own significant history. It also helps that the animation is absolutely breathtaking. The characters are beautifully designed, the backgrounds help blend the real world with the one within the Rats of Nim, and the character animation really captures their emotions and bring these drawings to life in the best way imaginable.
My child, shall we journey to your home?
Sir?
Tonight, we must move your house to the protected side of the stone.
When the movie was released, it was possibly the most critically acclaimed animated film of its time. Like, no joke, critics were actually saying that this felt more like Walt Disney's films more than what Disney was actually making at the time. But unfortunately, like Batman, while all the critics and all the audiences who actually saw it would end up loving it, its popularity ended up becoming unnoticed. Why? Two reasons: bad timing and bad distribution.
During production, MGM decided to merge with United Artists, and when it was time to bring out The Secret of Nim, they didn't even care. They barely even did any sort of marketing while only giving it a small wide release, and it was mostly overshadowed by the already successful E.T. Even nowadays, MGM would just treat it like any other kids film where owning a DVD or Blu-ray is family fun. But even if it's not given any platform to prominently display it, the film is slowly but surely climbing up its fame as more people recognize it as one of animation's best. Sure, it has yet to reach up to the ranks of The Emperor's New Groove or The Iron Giant that went from being forgotten flops to beloved masterpieces, but at least it's safe to say that it did get more recognition than it did when it was released. All it needs is just that one extra push to finally have its spot in pop culture that it rightfully deserves. This movie has the power to open any door, but only if it has the key.
Oh, thank you. I will treasure it, always.
I am on my way. I can go the distance.
Out of all the films to talk about in the underrated list, I never thought I would be in a position to actually talk about Steven Spielberg out of all people, especially when it's about one of his best films from the 2010s.
During that decade, Spielberg's directorial works would be more associated with fantasy films and realistic political dramas like Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, and The Post. But then there's also Tintin, which marked as his great comeback after the disappointment of the fourth Indiana Jones film, and it served as a reminder why he is the acclaimed director we all know him today. But he didn't do all this alone. By his side, he had an all-star cast, Peter Jackson and his team of artists at Weta Digital. Even Edgar Wright came in to be one of the writers. The result turned out to be the ultimate homage to the original Belgian comics by Hergé. In fact, what makes this film so strong is the way it adapts the comics to the big screen, perfectly capturing the charm, the sense of adventure, the personality of the characters, and even the humor of Tintin.
Never fear, Tintin. The evidence is safe with us. Thompson, where are you? Oh, well, I'm already downstairs. Do try to keep up.
But one of the most remarkable things about the movie is the use of motion capture as its animation medium. I know that it can be a controversial subject, and it can look like crap in the wrong hands like some of the Image Movers digital films, but in here, it managed to perfectly blend realism and the simple art style of Hergé, resulting in probably some of the best use of motion capture. Seriously, there are times when my mind would be tricked to think that I was watching a live-action movie.
Show yourself, Red Rackham!
When critics reviewed the film, they would often compare this to Indiana Jones, noticing the similarities between the treasure-hunting plot structure and the fun that would come with it. So, in a way, this movie actually works in many different levels, as an animated film, as a Steven Spielberg film, and as an adventure film. So, with that said, how come Tintin isn't as beloved or as noticed as Indiana Jones movie-wise? Now, maybe it is true that this film could be highly beloved and highly popular in other places of the world, but I'm not really seeing much love for it in Western cultures.
Like I said before, The Adventures of Tintin is based on the Belgian comics of the same name, and with the exception of the Smurfs, Americans don't care all that much for franchises that originate from Belgian comics. This is also why most of them don't even know who Asterix is. With how stubbornly patriotic they can be, they mostly care about things that are made in America, about American people doing American things. Stuff like Tintin, however, are more geared for a European audience, so both figuratively and literally, the books are foreign to Americans.
As for me, growing up in Montreal, Canada, I actually grew up in an environment where people read comics like Tintin, Asterix, and Spirou more so than the ones by DC and Marvel. Since French and English are actually both first languages here, it's no surprise that we would adopt a lot of European culture onto ours.
One more thing I would like to add about this is the discussion of a possible sequel. Since the movie ended off on a cliffhanger, there have always been talks about a sequel where Peter Jackson would become the director. But as time would move on, the sequel was always set on hold when both Spielberg and Jackson were always busy doing their own thing. However, as of 2018, Spielberg is actually still optimistic that a follow-up will happen no matter what. So maybe his adventures are not over just yet. The movie is an entire treasure in itself, and we cannot wait to find some more gold.
How's your thirst for adventure, Captain?
Unquenchable, Tintin.
Now before we go ahead and reveal what is the greatest movie that virtually nobody has ever heard of, I would like to have an honorable mention. Like I did with the DreamWorks hand-drawn films, I'm not just going to be talking about one movie in particular, but rather an entire genre of animated films, because they really are the embodiment of the underrated ones. In fact, they deserve to have a top 10 of their own, just so they can be fair to the movies of this list. So, with all that said, let's talk about the independent animated films.
These are the movies that lack many of the qualities that make a mainstream animated film. They don't have a big budget, they're not from any major animation studio, they don't often get big names attached to it, and they don't get much publicity or get released in many theaters. But what they lack in money, celebrities, and attention, they gain in creative freedom that mainstream filmmakers wish they had. The true beauty of these indie films is that they don't have to follow any rules. That's how they would even end up being known as some of the best animated films. They could tell whatever story they want, tell it to whichever audience, and express it in whichever animation medium it likes to use. In fact, this is the paradise that some animation fans beg for, where hand-drawn is actually the norm and computer animation is considered a rare breed.
Come on, you know that some of you would keep asking, when is hand-drawn coming back? When is hand-drawn coming back? When is hand-drawn coming back? It's right here! It never left! It was actually right here! Look, I got them right in my hands! It's all these! All freaking these! And some of these are like brand freaking new! You just actually gotta put in the effort! Just stop being lazy, stop complaining, and actually go and find those movies! Because the truth with indie films is that you have to go and look for it instead of it looking for you!
Sadly, the biggest drawback from being independent is that they're not easy to come by and can often only appear in certain film festivals. In a way, some see this as a bit of an injustice in the film industry, where there are many mainstream animated films that are far inferior with less effort and creativity put into them, who end up getting a lot more attention because they have more money thrown into them and their marketing to the point of making people think of only their film and nothing else. The only moment it can have to get some mainstream attention, and the most prestigious honor an indie film could get, is if it would be nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Oscars. But on the bright side, they do have their own subculture where they have their own brand of recognizable names and companies, including animators like Sylvain Chomet and Bill Plympton, and acclaimed studios like Cartoon Saloon. If you want a good start on where to find some good independent animated features, then I highly recommend checking out the collection of G-Kids. In fact, they're the ones who have the majority of the Oscar-nominated movies. If you're looking for the real hidden gems of animation, then all you have to do is look past the mainstream and come into the world of independence.
Oh, I cannot wait to introduce you guys to this one. Now, if you have seen it already, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, you're about to discover something amazing. Okay, so here's the thing. Imagine if you take Walt Disney's Fantasia, and then you add in the comedy of Monty Python's Flying Circus, and you mix it all together in Italy, then you end up with the 1976 Italian animated feature, Allegro Non Troppo.
Created by renowned animator Bruno Bozzetto, the whole movie is an entire parody of Fantasia, although it might not have realized it at first.
Sostengono che questo film, cosa assurda, l'avrebbe già fatto parecchi anni fa un certo Grisney, un americano, insomma.
Although it's not a direct parody where it would just poke fun at the stuff that happened in the Disney film, the movie would take its concept and just go absolutely nuts with it. But funny enough, the segments actually stand well on their own. Not only do they have some surprisingly strong animation, but they also offer some clever commentary and great humor. Except for the one with the cat, because that one is more of a tearjerker. Interestingly enough, this movie actually beat Fantasia 2000 by more than 2 decades in making an animated segment set to the Firebird. But it's not just the music and the cartoons that make Allegro a crazy one-of-a-kind experience. Between the segments, there are some live-action bits that have an entire story going on. Remember how people criticized Fantasia 2000, how there were too many celebrity hosts that were trying to be funny but are actually, not? This is what that film wished it would be. Actually, it goes beyond what 2000 wanted to do. Ironically, the live-action segments are more over-the-top and cartoony than the actual cartoon parts of the movie. You got the eccentric presenter, an orchestra of old ladies, an animator tirelessly making visuals of the music, bringing drawings to life, sex in the piano, a gorilla on the loose, and so much more!
Lasciami, lo tengo molto! Maledetto! Oh no! Oh, disgrazia, mollami! Fammi scendere ora!
It is absolutely crazy, but in all the right ways. And even if you take away the aspect of this being a Fantasia parody, it still stands well on its own as a great comedy with some really well-crafted cartoons. So how is it that a movie so good ended up being forgotten? Well, first of all, I just gotta say that this movie is not for kids. Let's just say that this film actually shows more boobs than a bunch of centaurs and flying harpies. But most importantly, the bigger reason as to why this is left in the unknown, it's simply because it's Italian.
I'm not saying that Italy doesn't care about animation at all. There are plenty of animation studios currently working there to this day. It's just that the country doesn't have either a prominent or an impactful animation history. In fact, Bruno Bozzetto might as well be considered the most famous Italian animator. Even within Europe, there are plenty of other countries that do a lot more to the medium than in Italy, like France, the UK, Germany, Ireland, and more.
What's even worse is that the most famous animated feature from Italy is considered to be one of the all-time worst. Remember that terrible animated ripoff of Titanic? Yeah, they're actually responsible for that one. Actually, no, wait, scratch that. They did 3 of them!
As a result, it's no surprise that an Italian animated film can easily get overlooked, especially one that is more adult-oriented. However, like Fantasia, it shouldn't really be treated like any other animated film. It should be looked as its own work of art, and I know that Italians are great at that. While it is a parody, it also pays homage to the Disney film, expanding the possibilities of the art form it innovated by having classical music be visually represented with some masterclass animation. It is extremely rare when an animated film would end up being considered as art more than just a movie, and this managed to succeed as that. It is admirable, highly artistic, insane, fun to watch, and most importantly, the most underrated animated film.
And that's all I've got for the top 10 underrated animated films. Hopefully you guys will give these movies a second chance so that maybe one day these movies won't be required to be on this list anymore. Now, of course, there are many ways that you can go and show some love to the works that would definitely need it. Like, you could go and spread the word, you could tell a friend or a family member, or you can actually go and buy it on Blu-ray, DVD, or digital. Speaking of which, do I have Allegro in my collection? No, I don't I? Is it? No. Huh. Well then, I guess there's no time like the present. Let me see, is it anywhere on Amazon? Just want to double check, hold on. Just want to see, Allegro Non Troppo. Oh, they do have it, okay, so, let me see. Jesus Christ, wearing a hat! You know what? How about buying the CD, you know? Buying the soundtrack would actually be equally as supportive, considering that, you know, like, it's a movie about music, so maybe it'll be much better to... Oh, no. That's like gaming console territory right there! Spread the word. Spread the word would actually be best. See you later, dudes.
All's well that ends well.
It's not ended.